Hello viewers, I am Deepti Anand. In my previous video, I have discussed with you specimen question paper History and Civics ICSE 2023, in which we have discussed about part 1 and part 2 section A only. Today we are going to discuss section B. Part 2, Section D comprises of total 5 questions, out of which 3 questions of history and 2 questions from contemporary world. A student has to attempt only 3 questions out of these 5 questions. So our first question of this Part 2 Section B, which is question number 6. The culmination of discontent against the British rule came with the Great Revolt of 1857. With reference to this, answer the following questions. Our first question is, what was the Doctrine of Lapse? Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General of India, annexed many states to the company using the Doctrine of Lapse. According to it, heirs adopted without the consent of the company could inherit only the private property of the deceased ruler and not his territory, which would come under the company's rule. It has another part, name the queen who became a victim of this policy. When the ruler of Jhansi died in 1853, leaving no natural heir, the widowed Rani Lakshmibai became a victim of this policy. Our B part is, mention any 3 economic causes of the revolt. First heading is exploitation of economic resources. First point, India was forced to export at cheaper rates raw materials like raw cotton and raw silk. Second, India was made to accept ready-made British goods duty-free. Third, Indian handmade goods were unable to compete with the cheaper machine-made British products. Second heading is drain of wealth. After the conquest of Bengal, the British began to purchase raw materials for their industries in England from the surplus revenues. Second, the process of plundering India's raw materials, resources and wealth by Britain started. Third, the transfer of wealth included the salaries, incomes and savings of Englishmen from India to England, for which India got no proportionate economic return, and this is called drain of wealth. Third heading is poverty and famines. Due to economic decline of peasantry and landed aristocracy, drought and natural calamities like famines ravaged in the country in the second half of the 19th century. Second, there were 12 major and numerous minor famines between 1765 and 1857. Third, the British government did nothing to lessen people's misery. C part is of 4 marks. Question is, mention any 4 administrative changes made by British after the revolt. Even though the uprising of 1857 was suppressed, it compelled the Britishers to make many important socio-political and administrative changes. This introduction is necessary for every 4-marker question. Now headings. First heading is end of company's rule. The most significant change was the end of the rule of the East India Company and assumption of the Government of India directly by the Crown. This was done directly by the Government of India Act of 1858, which had following provisions. Subpoints. Now the power was to be exercised by the Secretary of State, assisted by a 15-member India Council. The Secretary of State's salary and allowances were to be paid out of the revenues of India. Third, actual governance was to be carried on as before by the Governor General, who was also given the title of Viceroy, and Lord Canning was the first Viceroy under this Act. Second heading is Queen Victoria's Proclamation. This transfer of governance was made public at Allahabad in 1858 by Lord Canning. The proclamation promised that the Government of India would. First subheading is follow a policy of non-intervention in social and religious matters of Indians. Second, treat all subjects, Indians and Europeans, as equals. Third, grant a general pardon to all those who had taken part in the war except those who were found guilty of murder of British subjects. Third heading is administrative changes in the British Indian Army. After 1857's revolt, there was a systematic reorganization of the army in the following manner. First subheading, European troops were kept in the key geographical and military positions. Second, the strength of the European troops in India was increased. The ratio of European to Indian troops was fixed at 1:2 in Bengal army and 2:5 in Madras and Bombay armies. Next point, in order to discourage nationalism, measures such as introduction of caste and community in most regiments were taken. Last point, newspaper, journals and nationalist publications were prevented from reaching the soldiers. Now fourth heading is end of Mughals and Peshwas and many princely states. First subheading, with the death of Bahadur Shah II, who was deported to Yangon, the Mughal dynasty came to an end. Second, Nana Sahab, the last Peshwa, had fled to Nepal, and the office of Peshwa also came to an end. Third point, the Indian princes willingly became junior partners or agents of the British Crown because they were promised that they would continue as rulers of their states. Coming to second question of this section, which is question number 7, with reference to the first and second phase of the Indian national movement, answer the following. Our first part is what was the objective of assertive nationalists and mention any two contributions of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. First, the main objectives of the assertive nationalist was the immediate attainment of Swaraj. This means complete independence and not just self-government. Now, contributions of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. He is known as the father of assertive nationalism. First heading is demand for Swaraj. Tilak was the first to openly declare the demand for Swaraj. He said, Swaraj is my birthright and I shall have it. He was the first nationalist leader who sought close contact with the masses. He organized many akhadas and lathi clubs where physical training was imparted to inculcate courage, self-defense and patriotism. Second heading is established Home Rule League. Tilak set up a Home Rule League at Pune in 1916 to attain self-government within the British Empire by constitutional methods. Third is preached nationalism. In 1893, Tilak started using the traditional religious Ganpati festival to propagate nationalist ideas and started the Shivaji festival to encourage young Maharashtrians. He also started two newspapers, Maharata in English and Kesari in Marathi. Our second part of this question number 7 is who partitioned Bengal and state any two actual reasons behind the partition. On July 20, 1905, Lord Curzon announced the division of the province of Bengal into two provinces named Bengal and Eastern Bengal and Assam. This scheme was implemented on October 16, 1905. Actual reasons behind the partition included Bengal was the nerve center of the Indian nationalism, shows that the British hoped to stop the rising tide of nationalism. Second point is, the partition of the state was intended to curb Bengali influence by not only placing Bengalis under two administrations, but by reducing them to a minority in Bengal itself. Third is partition was meant to foster division on the basis of religion. East Bengal would be predominantly a Muslim majority state and West Bengal would have a Hindu majority. Our third part of this question number 7 is mention any four methods used by early nationalists. Introduction. The early nationalists were practical. They wanted to win freedom by a gradual process. They followed what is popularly known as constitutional agitation method. Three methods include, first point is 3 P's. They made use of 3 P's that are petitions, prayers and protests. They sent petitions, requests and letters of protest to the British government to look into the problems of the Indians. Second heading is held meetings. They held meetings where speeches were made and resolutions for popular demands were passed. They made use of the press to criticize government policies. Third is sent memorandums. They sent memorandums and petitions to government officers and the British Parliament. These petitions were carefully drafted with facts and arguments addressed to the government, and their real aim was to educate the Indian people. Fourth heading is Deputations of the Indian Leaders. Deputations of Indian leaders were sent to Britain. These political leaders carried on active propaganda in Britain. For example, Dadabhai Naoroji spent a major part of his life in Britain to create awareness among British people and politicians about the plight of Indians. Last heading is a British committee was set up. A British committee of the Indian National Congress was set up in London in 1889, who published a weekly journal named India to present India's case before the British public. Question number 8. The mass phase of the national movement led to the freedom of India. With reference to this phase, answer the following questions. Our first question is, what were the causes of the civil disobedience movement? And second part of this question is, name the march which marked the beginning of this movement. Now, the civil disobedience movement was started by Gandhiji in March 1930 in accordance with the decision taken at the Lahore session of the Congress. Now, causes. First heading is Simon Commission. It was an all-British commission appointed in November 1927 to investigate the need for further constitutional reforms in India. The absence of Indians in the commission was seen as an insult, and they decided to boycott the commission at every stage and in every form. Second heading is Demand for Purna Swaraj. British government did not accept the Nehru report, and the Congress passed the Purna Swaraj resolution at its Lahore session in 1929. The resolution declared Purna Swaraj to be the objective of the Congress. Gandhiji started the movement with his famous Dandi March from the Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi on the Gujarat coast on March 12, 1930. Here, I need to mention that every question has two parts. You need to write them carefully. Please don't ignore the second part of the question. Like in this question, name the march, it is the second part of the same question. So by mistake, please don't leave this part. Now, second part is mention any three causes of the non-cooperation movement. Gandhiji turned from a cooperator to a non-cooperator and decided to start the non-cooperation movement, which is a way of protesting in which one does not cooperate with the evildoer. Causes that led to non-cooperation movement are: first is Khilafat movement. It was started by Ali brothers in August 1920 for the preservation of the office of Khalifa, the religious head of the Muslims. Gandhiji combined the Khilafat movement with the non-cooperation movement as he saw in this an opportunity to unite the Hindus and the Muslims. Second is Rowlatt Act. It was passed in March 1919, which gave extraordinary powers to the British to imprison any person without trial and convict him in a court. The act came like a sudden blow to the Indians who were expecting self-governance. Gandhiji's appeal to the Viceroy to withhold his consent was ignored. So he started Satyagraha as a challenge to the government. No appeal, no vakil, no dalil is Rowlatt Act. Now, C part is Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. Large peaceful crowd gathered at the Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar on April 13, 1919 to protest against the arrest of the leaders like Dr. Saifuddin Kishliu and Dr. Satyapal. General Dyer surrounded the Bagh with his soldiers and ordered them to shoot at the crowd. The British government refused to make the amends for the atrocities in Punjab. So these were the causes. Now, third, last part of this question of 4 marks is mention any 4 clauses of the Mountbatten Plan. For the purpose of taking necessary steps for the transfer of power to the Indians, Lord Mountbatten was appointed the Viceroy. He put his plan for the partition of India and announced it on June 3, 1947. The main clauses of this plan included the following. First heading is partition. The country would be divided into 2 dominions, India and Pakistan. Second, relations with the 2 new dominions. It was for the 2 dominions to decide what relations they would have with the British Commonwealth and with each other. Third heading is a boundary commission. The plan provided for the creation of a boundary commission to settle the boundaries of the two dominions in case partition was decided upon. Next heading is princely states. The treaties with princely states would come to an end. They would be free to associate themselves with either of the dominions or to remain independent. Last heading is transfer of power. The plan ended with the declaration that the transfer of power would take place not in June 1948 but much earlier than that. The British Parliament would pass an act for the transfer of power before August 15, 1947. Previous three questions are from history. Now, next two questions are from contemporary world. So, question number 9 is look at the picture given and answer the following questions. First part is identify and briefly explain the above incident. This incident is known as the immediate cause for the First World War, known as Sarajevo Crisis. Points are Archduke Francis Ferdinand the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary was assassinated at Sarajevo, capital of Bosnia, on June 28, 1914. The assassination was organized by a secret society called Black Hand, formed by extremist Serbian nationalists. Austria served an ultimatum on Serbia on July 23rd, making 11 demands, out of which Serbia did not accept all. Austria declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. On August 1, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia and on August 3rd on France. Many other countries soon entered the war. Britain, France, Russia and their allies were called the Allied Power, while Germany, Austria and their allies were called the Central Powers. Second part of this question number 9 is mention any 4 conditions imposed on Germany in the Treaty of Versailles. The victorious powers or the allies met in a conference in Versailles. As a result of the discussions, the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919. The conditions imposed on Germany were to prevent it from going to war again. The main terms of the treaty were: first, the treaty declared Germany guilty of aggression and the amount of reparations was fixed at $33 billion. Second, Germany lost Alsace-Lorraine to France. Danzig became a free port in Polish territory. Third, the coal mines in the German area called Saar were ceded to France for 15 years and the area was to be governed by the League of Nations. Germany ceded parts of her pre-war territory to Denmark and lost all her colonies to the victorious allies, Britain, Belgium, South Africa and Portugal. Last part of this question is name the organization established to maintain peace after the First World War and mention any 3 of its objectives. The introduction is the horrors of the war convinced the leaders of the world that there must be a mechanism to prevent war and promote international cooperation. Thus, the organization League of Nations was established to maintain peace after the First World War. The League of Nations was created as a world organization of all independent states in 1920. Now, objectives of League of Nations, first heading is restriction on secret treaties and alliances. All the states of the world were prohibited from entering into any secret treaties and alliances. Second heading is prohibition on mass destructive weapons. The member states were not supposed to maintain huge armies, warships and destructive armaments. Third is peaceful settlement of disputes. All states were to respect each other's independence. They were to refer their mutual disputes, if any, to the League of Nations for a peaceful settlement. Last point is to promote cooperation. Apart from political functions, the League of Nations was supposed to promote cultural, social and economic cooperation among the member states. Now coming to last question, which is question number 10. In this question, the United Nations organization was established to maintain peace in the world. With reference to this organization, answer the following questions. Now, first part is, what was the composition of the Security Council? The Security Council is the executive body of the United Nations. It has the primary responsibility for the maintenance of peace and security. It functions continuously. Its composition is, it is the heading composition. Now points. The council consists of 15 members. A representative of each of its members must be present at all times at the United Nations headquarters. Second, it has 5 permanent members: China, France, Russia, Britain, and the United States of America. Third is the 10 non-permanent members are elected by the General Assembly by a two-third majority for a term of 2 years. Last point is the presidency of the council rotates monthly according to the English alphabetical listing of its member states. The negative vote of a permanent member is called a veto, and the council is powerless to act if any of the permanent member uses a veto power. Second part of this question number 10 is, mention any 3 functions of the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. Its seat is at The Hague, Netherlands. It began work in 1946. The functions of International Court of Justice are, first is the parties, heading. The member states of the UN are entitled to appear and apply before the International Court of Justice. Second heading is voluntary jurisdiction. The court is competent to entertain a dispute if the states concerned agree to take the issue to it. Third is compulsory jurisdiction. It has compulsory jurisdiction in the following areas. First subheading is, against the background that a large number of treaties provide that disputes are submitted to the court. Second subheading is, its jurisdiction extends to disputes pertaining to the interpretation of international law and reparation, that is compensation, to be made for the breach of an international obligation. Last is advisory opinion. The only bodies at present authorized to request advisory opinions of the court are 5 organs of the UN and 16 specialized agencies of the United Nations family. Now third question of this last question number 10, what is the full form of UNESCO, and mention any 3 of its functions. Now full form of UNESCO is United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. This was established on 4th November 1946. Main functions of UNESCO are in the field of education. So our first heading is education. The largest sector of UNESCO's is in the field of education. First subheading is removal of illiteracy by encouragement to adult education, distance education, and emphasis on education of women and girls. Second is financial assistance of education of disabled children and provision of grants and fellowships to scholars and teachers. Third is organization of book fairs and festivals at international and national level. Second heading is scientific activities. Scientific activities undertaken by UNESCO are, first point is, UNESCO organizes seminars and conferences of students of various countries and circulates the information through journals and exhibitions. Second is, it promotes basic research in fields like geology, mathematics, physics, and oceanography. Third is, it encourages the study of social sciences in order to focus attention on combating all forms of discrimination, improving the status of women, and helping them solve their problems. Third heading is communication. UNESCO develops communication for dissemination of information. First, it has set up regional networks, trained technicians, and deals with both hardware and software aspects of information. Second, it improves the quality of press, the films and video services. Third, it upholds the freedom of press and the independence of media. Last heading is preservation of cultural heritage. UNESCO encourages modernization without the loss of cultural identity and diversity. First point, it provides technical advice and assistance, equipment and funds for the preservation of monuments and other works of art. Second, it aims to protect the world's inheritance of books, works of art and rare manuscripts. Third, it pays attention towards cultural development through the medium of films. I am sure these solutions will help you while preparing for your final exams. Thank you for watching till the end. Keep sharing and watching. Thank you.